Hey folks, welcome to Ron's Beer Cellar. I'm Ron, this is my cellar, and this is where I sit and drink and ponder the meaning of beer and such. So tonight I am going to talk a little bit about the Reinheitsgebot. The Reinheitsgebot is the German purity law on this day, April 23rd in 1516. It was adopted as the rule of the land, and many people know of this German beer law because it stated that you could only make beer out of barley, water, hops, and that missing part that later got added in the I don't think until maybe the 1800s was yeast. And there's a lot of speculation on why that was not in there in the original law. So I'm going to ponder on that a little bit tonight. But first, let's pour beer. Let's drink some Schlenkerla. This is the classic Marzen, classic smoked Marzen. Ah, yeah, there we go. Always good to chat with a little bit of beer. So, got my Schlenkerla barrel over here, my fake barrel. And the story's not about Schlenkerla, but it is kind of about Franconia. And some of the oldest breweries in Germany, some of the oldest breweries in the world are in Franconia, that middle part of Germany. Oh man, I wish you could smell the rich, sweet, intensely smoky goodness of this beer. Prost. Smoky heaven in a glass right there. So, Reinheitsgebot. Words of the night. Reinheitsgebot. Can you see those? Reinheitsgebot. Hefe, which is yeast, as in Hefe Weizen, right? Sometimes you'll see in Germany a Weizen mit Hefe, Hefe, and that means with yeast, as most Hefeweizens have. So here we go again. Reinheitsgebot. Looks like Reinheitsgebot, but it's not. It's Reinheitsgebot. Hefe, yeast, mit Hefe, and Hefner, as in Hugh Hefner, but not Hugh Hefner, but a Hefner, which was a yeast handler. And that's the interesting part of the story. So the Reinheitsgebot, beer purity law, everyone knows that part, or a lot of people know that part. And it was made for many reasons. Some people like to say it was because of the purity of the beer, but it had a lot to do with taxes and who owned the wheat fields and hops. People had used things other than hops and killed people, poisoned people. So there were actually multiple reasons for that. You can look that up on the interwebs. It's out there, Reinheitsgebot. The interesting part is about yeast, because yeast was not mentioned in the early days. This was originally declared in the 1400s, and later 1516 it was changed and adopted across Germany. So a lot of folks have speculated, a lot of people have taught, I've said it, that it was because back in those days, 1300s, 1400s, 1500s, that we didn't know perhaps what yeast was. Oh, I forgot something really important. Forgot to put my German hat on tonight. There we go. That's much better. So maybe people didn't know what yeast was. So that's why it wasn't listed. There was thoughts at the time. A lot of monasteries made beer back in those days, and if you did it right, then God gave you beer. Um, or you had the magic barrel, the magic spoon, um, the magic paddle, that if you did everything right, you would get beer. So while maybe that was true in some instances, I have friends in the in the Franconia region, beer geek friends there, who have looked into some very old brewing books. I think we're gonna we continue to learn about beer, and I think we're gonna learn that a lot was a lot of brewing as we know it, lager brewing and such like that, maybe originated in Franconia. It may be the cradle of lager beer, cold cellar brewing, and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of really old brewing books in that area. And going back to the 1200s, 1300s, and 1400s, there are multiple mentions of Hefners. And a Hefner was a yeast handler. That was their business. And these people, they got the yeast ready for bakers as well as brewers. And there's even discussion, this is a talk for another day, but discussion that the yeast they prepared for the cellar brewing, maybe lager brewing, made better beer than the yeast that they prepared for brewing at room temperature up top. Anyway, we'll talk about that some other day. But anyway, there was this whole industry of Hefners going back to the 13s and 1400s. So they knew what yeast was, obviously, and it was being used. So the reason it's probably not part of the Reinheitsgebot, and this is other people's speculation, is that it wasn't considered an ingredient. It was more a part of the process. So it was more like a tank. So later it became more known as an ingredient, I guess, and it was added. But it wasn't that they didn't know what yeast was. Highly unlikely. It just wasn't listed as an ingredient. So interesting little thought there. Also, I'll finish with this. In lots of places, including here in America, back in the old days when you didn't have a last name or had forgotten it or lost it over the years, things like that weren't as important. A lot of times you took the name of what you did, your occupation. Blacksmiths, coppersmiths, pewtersmiths, a lot of those became smiths. Maybe that's my heritage. You took maybe the name of your town. But a name like Hefner, there's a fair amount of Hefners out there, as in Hugh Hefner, and his father was of German descent. So maybe Hugh Hefner's family, once upon a time, back in the 1300s, maybe right up there in Franconia, was a yeast handler. And helped provide yeast to the bakers and the brewers of Franconia. Anyway, that's it. Just a little chat. And a cheers, a prost. Everybody stay safe out there. We'll get through this. It's going to be a rocky climb out, but we'll get through it. Prost.